Hello everybody, it's Jenny. I'm back. We're in Colorado this time, and I'm going to make for you an all-American apple pie with a slight twist. We'll bake it in a paper bag, and I'll explain when we do that how much more efficient it's going to be. We'll start with the crust, but first of all, I'm in a friend's kitchen, and since I'm working with flour, I'm definitely going to put on an apron. Professional chefs put this fold in their aprons for a reason, and we bring the tie up front and tie it like this. And you don't have to do this if you don't want to, but we do it so that we can put a towel right here handy to whip out if we need to touch the hot handle or we have a spill, or anyway, that's why we do that. So here I am ready to go. So we're going to start with pie crust, which is really so easy. Let's go through it real quick just so you can see how easy. So we're going to start with 1 1/4 cup flour, which is for a 1 crust pie. And I'm going to add some salt, and really just a pinch. And I'm going to stir that up in there. Now there are many ways to make pie crust. You can use your food processor. You can use what they call a pastry cutter, which is round and has little wires. But I'm going to do it the old-fashioned way with just a fork to show you that you can do a pie crust with just a fork. American pie crust is truly an American item. It is not made anywhere else in the world. I'm using unsalted butter, which is a good thing to do when you've salted the flour. If you use salted butter, you really probably shouldn't salt the flour. You'll end up with a salty crust. I'm going to cut this into 6 tablespoons. I'll make it easy. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And then you start to cut this into the flour. And you use cold because it doesn't melt. It makes it a little more work. Okay, I'm cutting it into the side of the bowl. See, I'm gonna fill my arm muscles. Keep from getting too loose in the arm there as an old lady. Crisco, of course, cuts in a little easier because it's so soft, and lard as well. You can put your fingers in it if you need to. Michael Calvert showed me how to do this. This is his grandmother's recipe. Like I said, if it's too cold, using the warmth of your fingers to loosen the butter up just a little bit. And it's good if you have a few big pieces. I know that seems maybe a little bit big, but little marble-sized pieces of butter are going to make your crust very flaky. And I can actually start to smell this butter. It smells so good. Okay, another trick that modern cooks have discovered is that alcohol does not develop the gluten in the flour, and that's one thing you don't want to do. That's why we don't overmix a pie crust, because we don't want the gluten in the flour to develop. And they've discovered that if you use a little bit of alcohol, you can get your crust as moist as you need to be able to manipulate it in the way that you want to without making it tough. And this is how it should look. Coarse, mealy, a few clumps of butter before we add our liquid. So I've got my flour the way I want it. I'm going to make a little teeny well in the middle, just a little indentation. And like I said, instead of using all water, I'm going to use some water and some alcohol. So we'll start with cold water so we don't melt the butter. And I'm going to go 3 tablespoons. And then instead of all water, I'm going to use Kirschwasser, which is a cherry flavored brandy. The alcohol will cook out and the cherry flavor will practically disappear. You can use vodka, you can use any kind of alcohol that you want. And there we go. And I'm kind of pulling it into the center so that I can get it moist without really mixing it, because I just want to moisten it. You can double this recipe if you have a 2 crust pie. The recipe's actually in my book, but I'd like this video to accompany it so that everybody feels comfortable knowing how to make this. All right, the next step is with waxed paper. Now you can just put flour down. This is a nice granite countertop, but I'm just going to show you the simplest way to do this, ladies or gentlemen. Gather it into a ball as best you can. I have a beautiful marble rolling pin, You can also use a wooden one, of course, but I want to tell people if you don't have a rolling pin, don't panic. Use something that's shaped like this, a wine bottle, and just make sure that it's clean. But if you're using wax paper, as I am, there'll be no contact, so there's no issue of anything being contaminated. Now, put it in the center and push out, and then push out. And then turn it. You might have to readjust a little bit. Push out, and then push out. So you're not going back and forth. You don't want to make a tough pie crust. And now I'm going to shape it a little bit. And it's really the weight of this marble. The temperature is important, but not that important. It's pretty cool today. But the weight of the marble just pushes the crust. I don't have to press very hard, which is an advantage over wood. And I can tell that this is going to be plenty big. So just gently. Now if you need to get a little knife, or I have one right here, and just go like this. Don't panic. And it's a very short crust, so it might be teensy bit sticky. It. And I'm just going to lay this in. And now I can adjust because it's still stuck on that bottom layer. Oh, look how flaky it is. That's because we didn't over mix that flour and butter. This is actually kind of fun. See it come all together. And if you get a hole, don't worry, because we're going to patch them. That's because it's very buttery. There we go. That's just butter. Like I said, don't worry. Okay, so what you do now is you just take a little piece. And it's very malleable because we were able to put enough liquid in it because of the Kirschwasser. So just gently layer in, taking the extras off the sides. Now I'll tell you, a lot of people at this point, they just take a pie crust and they just run a knife along the edge and cut it off, which is easy to do. You just go like that. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold it under and give us a teensy bit more crust to work with so I can make a fluted edge. So I don't need too much. I'll pull off any extra. Just giving me a touch there. And you can add too if it's too thin. And I can work from here too. I have a little bit more bulk on the edge so I can make a nice flute. Just stick it on there. You'd think this pie crust would come out whole, so if yours doesn't, don't feel bad. Alright, that's a little extra. Okay, so let me show you. We're just going to go like this. Nothing complicated. Oh, this is going to be so nice and flaky. I'm going to put a little flour in my hands so I'm not sticking. Just like this. Can you see that fluting? It's starting to come as a flute. I'll show you. Get it all the way around. This is a nice malleable dough. Now most people actually do let their dough rest before they work with it, but we didn't have to work it very much because we were able to use enough liquid. So I didn't rest this at all, and it's working just fine. So just be a nice simple edge. I know when it looks like it's not cooperating, you're worried, but that actually means you're going to have a very flaky crust, so it's a very good thing. See how that's flaking off? That's a good thing. So don't feel like you're incompetent or it's not coming out right. There we go. And now I'm just going to set that aside and we'll make our filling. Now instead of throwing anything away, and especially if you have little ones at home, take those extra trimmings, just bring them back together. Just like that. You can even have the kids do this and stick it in there. Fold that over, press it out. Place this in a pan. And you can use either a little bit of an egg white or egg yolk or a little bit of milk or cream. It's just to get it moist. And we're going to sprinkle a little sugar on there. And when we bake our pie, we'll bake this and we'll have a sugar crust. So that the little ones won't have to wait for the pie to cool. They can have a bite of crust before everything's finished, because it'll take long enough, they'll be anxious. Just like that. The reason chefs put their hands way up high is so that it spreads out more evenly. Might be a little burning in the pan there, but we don't mind. So we'll put that aside until we're ready to bake our pie. Before you put your cutting board down, put your cloth down, paper towel that's wet, so you don't have slipping. And that's really important. You're gonna be working with sharp knives. There are so many kinds of apples out there, and they're not all good for cooking. It can be very confusing. I'm gonna give you a quick list today. My mother used to cook with wine sap. Delicious, not so easy to find anymore. Rome Beauty is also one. A Macintosh. Granny Smith makes a very tart but delicious pie. Golden Delicious is sweet. Pink Lady and Gala are both very sweet apples. I'm going to use Honeycrisp today. I've never cooked with them before. They're a delicious eating apple, but I've been told we can cook with them. So we're going to make a pie today, and we'll all get to see how the Honeycrisp bakes. Here we go. These say Rainier. That means they're coming from Washington, I'm sure. Beautiful. I'm sure they're waxed. That's why they have that shine, and that probably keeps them from dehydrating. But we're taking those peels off anyway. Make sure you have a good peeler, ladies, because it'll just make your life easy. We don't want to get that problems with our wrists. And you can see this goes fast. And in between, I'm going to dip my apples in water. It doesn't have to be lemon juice right away. Just as long as you've put them in water. Now they're not going to oxidize and brown, and I'll be able to get them all peeled before I have any oxidation. So let me go ahead and peel these apples. Some people like to go like that, and you can do that, but I have more control pulling it toward me, I think. This is actually meditation for me. Here we go. You could do this part and then use your food processor to slice your apples. But I quarter them, and you can see I keep them flat all the time so they're not slipping and sliding, and I'm not doing this with a paring knife. It makes it efficient. This one we dropped on the ground yesterday, and you can see it's got a bruise, but I'll just cut that out. Okay, and now we're ready to slice. Don't feel like you have to be fast. I might just chop away really fast, but don't let it scare you. And they don't have to be perfect. And then clean your cutting board off. Get them in your bowl so you have a little bit of work. That's the way to roll. And if we work fast enough, these won't brown. I like to keep them flat, like you see, so they're not wobbling around. I don't do them this way. I do them this way. And I'm keeping my knuckles curled so that I'm not cutting the tips of my fingers. I'm using this as a guide. And if you got a few little pieces, don't worry. They'll all come right into the pie wonderfully. And I'm going to show you something else. If you want to do this by hand, you can just do it like this. It's totally okay. You can sit there with the grandkids and do it by hand. I just did this the way I did it with the French knife to make it quick. So they all go in, and you can see just 5 apples was plenty. I think the recipe called for 7, but I didn't need that many to make 2.5 pounds. So now we're gonna go with sugar, 3/4 of a cup. If you don't have a canister, just work out of the bag. There we go. You can eye it. 1 teaspoon cinnamon, and I'm going to show you people a trick. This is great. Your hands can be used as measuring spoons if you don't have one. So let me just get this off, and I'm going to prove it to you. Your hands are what they used to use for measurements. Baker's measurements are in your hands. So a teaspoon is what you're going to be able to put in that cup of your hand. And try it at home with salt or sugar or something that's not expensive. Now a tablespoon is what you can hold in a fist. And there are 3 teaspoons in a tablespoon. These are called Baker's measurements. These are what men used when they used to bake 200 years ago at the bakery. So we need 2 tablespoons flour. Look at that, it's gonna be what I can hold in my fist. So practice at home if you don't believe me. And we're gonna have some lemon juice, which will, these apples are very sweet, so it'll be good to bring up a little of the tart to it. And it'll also prevent oxidation. And I'm using this strainer to keep those seeds from getting in there. And if you want to use a grinder to get all of the, a reamer, I guess we call it. And you can also get some rind up here if you want to. This is my favorite tool, a microplaner. And you can go like this, so you can see what you're getting. Or you can just go like this and grate it right in to your dish. And I just want a little because it'll brighten it up. Hate to waste the zest of anything. All right, all the lemon juice, and we'll toss this and put this into our pie shell. Isn't that amazing? That's all there is to it, ladies. No reason not to do this yourself. It'll be a much more delicious pie than if you bought the filling. I want to tell you that the flour is what's going to thicken it. And if you don't have flour, you could put in half as much cornstarch. 1 tablespoon of cornstarch is the equivalent of 2 tablespoons of flour. Okay, so we're all covered. See how we're all covered? And I'm going to lay these into my pie shell. Now if you want more cinnamon, that's fine, but this is going to be a very apple-y tasting pie. You can put raisins in it or nuts, but you can see I was right about the quantity of apples. We couldn't get any more apples in there. They will bake down substantially, but I just probably wouldn't be able to pile any more on there. So I'm gonna get them in there as tight as I can. And then we're gonna make a crumbly crust, more like a Dutch apple crust, only not, but similar to, as opposed to a rolled out crust. And that is just really the ratio I love. It's 1 to 1 to 1. It's 1 stick butter or margarine, 1 cup flour, 1 cup sugar. I love those ratios, that I can remember. All right, I'm gonna set this aside and put that top crust together. Okay, here we are with our ratios. A stick of butter is a half a cup. So we got a half a cup of butter or margarine. And if you're not gonna use margarine, you might want to salt this a teensy bit if you use unsalted butter, but that's all up to what you're using. Here we go, half a cup of sugar. Doesn't have to be exact, as you can see. Half a cup of flour. Just level it off. And you're gonna just work this with your hands like a beurre Monnier, which means butter hand or hand butter. And you're gonna bring this into a paste. And this butter is softer. This is not the cold butter we used for the pastry. We wanna make this very malleable and completely homogenized. So I'm using my fist. And my hands are impeccably clean, as Julia would say. I washed them right before we started, didn't I, boys? Okay, we've got it all together. You can see it's come together. So now, this is a fun part for kids too. You really just you just dab it all over the pie. And if you have little gaps, that's okay too. And everything that's on my fingers, I'm gonna peel off and put on here. And it's gonna sort of melt onto it and make a beautiful crust. And that's so easy. And what I'm gonna do, get this very last bit, is just get a little bit of flour on my fingers. Just a little flour. And then I'll be able to get this off, move this around, spread it out. And that's really good enough. Very rustic, homemade looking. And I'm gonna clean up my hands. I'm gonna put it in a paper bag. So you do not have to bake this pie in a paper bag. It's just that it's a cool little trick. And for a couple of reasons. The paper will not burn. Just open her up, just regular shopping bag, stick her in there. It doesn't get hot enough to burn at 350. But it gives this wonderful aroma. It makes the house smell good too. And also then when your pie boils over, which apple pies invariably do, it doesn't go all over the oven. And when you pull it out to let it cool, let's say you're gonna travel with it, maybe not till the next day, you just leave it in there and it stays perfectly fresh. All right, without refrigeration, or of course you can refrigerate it. Now if you don't have a stapler, use some paper clips. And that's all there is to it. Oven is preheated. I've of course prepped the rack so that this paper bag is gonna fit. Slide your hand in under. Just slide that in. And it will bake for 1 hour and 15 minutes, probably, until it's bubbling at least. You'll hear it bubbling. And then you'll know, and you can just be rest assured it will be fine and perfectly baked. You don't have to open it up to look at it. This is what it's gonna look like when it's done though. This is in my cookbook. You see I've made notes. I like to print out my pages so that I can make notes. I can smell that pie and I think it's been an hour at least. So, we're gonna pull it out. Oh, look at that, I can tell. See, when you get these little oil spots in the bag, you know it's done its business. When you get oil spots, then you know that it's, cooked, and I can hear it bubbling, and see it's all around the bag, and it saved the oven from the mess, but it means that this pie is fully cooked all the way through the center, and those apples are done and delicious. Looks beautiful. Take a peek in there. I'm going to show you how blonde it is. You see that? What I'm going to do, you're laughing at me. We've already captured most of the mess. So what I'm going to do is finish this open. Like I said, you can bake this pie without being in a bag. But look at how I saved my oven from all this buttery, gooey mess. So now I can just clean the bottom off a little bit and set it in the oven to finish when I pull this chicken out, and it'll be perfect. Doesn't that look homemade and rustic and wonderful?